Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest this morning, Mr. Russ Altman. What's going on, Russ? How's it going, man?
Morning, Tyler. I'm having a great day. Just finished up attending the CPHRAB conference yesterday at the Hyatt.
How was that?
It was fantastic.
Who's running? Who's leading the CP? Who's leading them right now?
That is an excellent question.
I think Rod Miller used to do it, and then Rod moved on. And Rod's on my list of people I should touch base with. So sorry, audience, for me having my own thought process live on it.
See, we pulled a thread and went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I was like, what? Tell me more. Okay, well, before we go down too many more rabbit holes, let's let the audience into the tent with us so they know who and what and where. If they don't know about you, which they probably do, Calgary's a big small town. Director of Business Development at Stacked Consulting and founder at Red Fox. I got your business card in front of me. I love your logo. So if someone's curious, just check out his LinkedIn profile just for the logo alone, and we'll get into maybe a little backstory behind that. But what is Stacked? What is Red Fox? Who's Russ? What are you up to these days? What blows your hair back these days, Russ?
So, long story short, I've been in sales and business development for the last 20, 30 years, and most of it's been focused on tech, various MSPs, IT sort of background. And my last role, full-time employment role, ended in September of last year. And just going through, how the market was, the needs of the market were shifting. And the employment market wasn't looking particularly healthy at the time. And so I sat down with some friends and, we were chatting about, ways to move forward. And the consensus seemed to be that a fractional offering would solve a lot of problems for a lot of people and a lot of businesses. And it would allow me the opportunity to sort of diversify where I put my efforts. And thus, Red Fox was born. And we're a growth strategy company, and we offer fractional growth strategy consulting for businesses in the sort of small to medium enterprise range, and businesses that are looking to move away from founder-led sales to scale their growth. Lots of businesses do very well year after year with founder-led sales, but when they really want to scale and grow, then this founder needs to step back from sales, which is typically an operational role, and they need to be more strategic, and they need to have a higher view. And so that's where they bring me in. And, maybe they're not ready to commit to a full-time role. Maybe they want a director of business development or a VP of sales or something of that ilk, but, they're not ready to commit the budget to it, or they're just not ready. They don't think they need that full-time role, but they still want to tap into the skill set of that individual. And that's where they start talking with me, and we have some conversations, and we see what they need and what's a good fit and what sort of commitment would make sense for them. And, then I end up, as a director of business development for an organization like Stacked Consulting.
Sweet. So that is a successful continuation of. So I want to unpack fractional growth, a growth strategy for what falls under. Like it's a bit of a catch-all in my mind. I get it. Growth strategy. We're going to grow. We need strategy. That's going to involve sales. That's going to involve a bunch of things. What are kind of the handful of what's under that bucket that's really obvious? Obviously, business development, I think, comes to most people's mind. But there's 100%. Some other things. There's systems. There's it's growth is more complex than just sales.
100%. And honestly, you've touched on the one thing there that most people overlook is the systems aspect of it.
Okay.
Most people look at the human-centric focus of business development and growth. And they're like, okay, so you're going to help us with our sales. And yes, I will do that. But first of all, we're going to sort of take a deep dive into your systems, and we're going to see how you're supporting your sales process. We're going to see what that looks like. If you're still tracking your leads and your, customer relationships on an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet, then it might be time to look at a more comprehensive CRM tool, like a HubSpot, for instance. And Red Fox is a HubSpot partner. So
yeah, I know you got a background, which we'll touch on that a little bit. There's so many platforms out there. Obviously, that one's pretty. They've done a good job of being very known, and oftentimes adopted, but paid for, but underutilized in a lot of organizations I've talked to with HubSpot.
100%.
Oh, if I only used a fraction of what this beast would do. It's like me and my mobile phone. I know it does more things, but it's kind of good enough. And then you're paying this monthly. Anyways, we'll circle back on HubSpot because I'd love to get your insights on that, because that is a often I don't want to say overpaid for them. Companies feel like they're overpaying because they're underutilizing it. Is that the platform's fault? But that's another. Let's pause that for back section of this.
They know it's a reputation, but they don't understand how to implement it properly.
Yeah. And how to use it. And so many organizations have been successful. I like that you said that about founder-led sales, relationships, the things that get us all going. And it's easy to cut corners. And sometimes founders aren't the best at following systems, even if they think it's a good idea, because they're just, I do it the way I do it and it works. But that big question is, how do you scale that? You often don't.
Well, and the founder becomes the bottleneck to the growth, right? Because their time and energy is finite. And so everything they do takes away from something else they could do. And so at some point, as a founder, you've swept the floor, you've, cleaned the bathroom, you've done it all. But at some point you have to decide, is it cost effective? Is it the best, most productive use of my time to be doing that? Or can I delegate that? And sales follows under that as well.
When is that? And I know it's subjective and it's individual, but when you're looking in at an organization, you're having the first founder coffee with a perspective, could be maybe a senior leader at that organization. It's like, hey, from the outs, we need, maybe it's the founder themselves. What are some of the things that you go, yeah, you know what? You're absolutely, this is time to do this, or no, you should keep going with the way you are. And maybe when you get to this level, like what are some of the red light, green lights that you see coming in as the consultant?
That's a great question. There's a couple of key indicators. One is always the numbers. If you've spent, say, you've been in business 10 years, sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more, but you've had a pretty steady trajectory of growth. The ups and downs exist, but overall you've been trending upward with your growth, but now you've plateaued. That's a great indicator. The other indicator is maybe your growth has continued from a revenue standpoint, but other balls are being dropped. Other priorities are being missed. Because that's what happens when a founder who's great at sales, loves doing it, continues to pursue the sales aspect. He's not doing the strategic development. He's not the visionary for the organization. He's not, taking care of all of the other things, the administrative tasks, albeit sometimes less enjoyable tasks, but they're not being done. And so you start to see other gaps in the process, and the business starts to suffer. Maybe they have turnover because, the culture hasn't been, paid enough attention to. Maybe they have, other issues with processes, accounting, various internal functions that aren't being addressed.
When you typically sit down for that conversation, is it often like, oh, I'm reaching out to you, Russ, because I want more sales? And then it turns into like, let's actually it feels like that conversation might switch very quickly in the dialogue. I'm guessing, I'm putting myself in. I've had many go like, hey, we need this, we need a new website. And you get in there and like, whoa, you need a whole new think about your marketing, about your brand, your position, your market. It often is a bigger conversation, but there's always the tip of the iceberg that gets the phone to ring, quote unquote.
100%. And that's it. They feel that their growth has stagnated for whatever reason, or they're just finding that they don't have enough time to do all of the things. Maybe they're still getting lots of inbound leads. Maybe they're still getting lots of referrals, but the founder or whoever he's designated just doesn't have the time to deal with all of those. And so he's feeling overwhelmed. And so that can be, another pressure point. But, we sit down and we start to talk and we say, okay, what's the objective here? And always the objective is to grow. That's why we're in a room, right? We're going to grow. And so then we start to look at what they've been doing currently and how that's been working out. And sometimes it's not a matter of doing a whole bunch of things differently or adding a whole bunch of things to the mix. Sometimes it's as simple as taking things out of the mix and removing obstacles. And because sometimes, founders are great at running their business in a lot of ways, but sometimes they're not so great at managing their business. And it can be a bit of a different discipline. And, when you're used to selling your product or your passion, that can be great. But when it starts to having a team of people that you need to manage selling that product or passion, it can be an entirely different prospect.
Yeah, it is a different beast. Do you also see a lot, and we touched on it with HubSpot, I'll circle back on it because we run into it, and we have a world of software sales that tell you that their software is the solution to everything. So let's just buy a platform. Let's just get a HubSpot. Pick on HubSpot. Not picking on HubSpot. We're picking on the companies that buy it without actually understanding what they're buying. To be clear, not picking on HubSpot at all. Do you see that a lot where by the time they talk to you, they've already tried to buy, they've already tried something, often a tool, an external bolt-on of some kind. This will solve it. This will solve it. Yeah. Okay. So talk to me about the addiction of, well, I'm just one software, monthly reoccurring cost away from solving my problem. And that rarely, in my experience, without the right systems and operational discipline, all it does is create more problems with all of a sudden, how much are we spending a month on technology that we're not using? I'm jaded a bit, but I've seen it so many times.
It's absolutely true. And the other thing that happens, especially with system software like CRMs or ERPs or project management software, there's a certain stickiness to it. Once you go down a road with one of those tools, you've invested so much money and so much time in the adoption and implementation of those tools that, it can be a bit of a, like, wow, we've invested so much in it.
Well, the sunk cost fallacy, like all that stuff kicks in. The psychology of what makes us human. It's almost like they design it that way as companies.
Well, one of the things,
and again, I'm not faulting anybody except for us leaders who try to solve bigger problems with bolt-on IT solutions.
I'm going to sound a little bit like a HubSpot fanboy here, and
all right, you gave the disclaimer, so everything after this is fair game. It's
forewarned. But one of the things that I love about it is they have a free version, and I think
you can play around in the sandbox.
It's an underutilized tool that's extremely powerful. For most solopreneurs, even small businesses, I would say if you're at like less than 5 people, use the free version, and you're going to get so much value out of that tool. You still get like all the integrations, you get all of the contacts, all of the records, and it's fantastic. And then, once you've used it for 6 months or a year and you're starting to push the bounds of what it's capable of, then decide if you want to upgrade to their starter edition or their professional edition. Once you see that it's adding value to your process, but use the free version, because that's where you're going to see the real value.
Well, what an opportunity to induce trial, to create the operational discipline around it, and then by the time you do decide to make the purchase, you're already down the road. Like it is kind of perfect in its sense, and of course, it's part of their sales process. But why not? That's
100%. It's a great model, and the one caveat that I would say to that though is just because it's free, you don't necessarily need to spend no money on implementing it. Find somebody
spend
who
the money in a
knows
different area. Yeah, touche.
Yes, find somebody who knows it, get it set up properly so that you're using it in an effective way and you're utilizing all of the features that are available in that free version, rather than, like you said, you spent a year using this and you're not getting any value out of it. You're not connecting it to anything, and it's just another tool that's sitting there on the shelf.
I love what your advice, like solid advice, solid takeaway that I will call out. Just because it's free doesn't mean you shouldn't invest in making sure that you can actually, it's not a waste of your team's time. It's not a distraction. It's not just another noisy thing I have to log into. So take that money that you're quote unquote saving by using the free model and pay somebody to help you get it onboarded properly and get that guidance. And that's simple advice that is often not followed, and I've not followed it in the past. Like I'm not preaching. I'm only preaching from the place of like, where have I stepped on that landmine before? Just hopefully not stepping on it today or tomorrow. When you work with different companies, obviously you're based in Western Canada. I'm assuming you have relationships, talk to companies all over the place. Where are we, or is there any perspective that you might have? And I don't want to lead the witness on this. I'm totally leading the witness on this question. Where are we as from a sophistication perspective around what you focus on in Western Canada, in Calgary, in Alberta versus a Toronto or maybe a bigger center in the US? Just always heard people say like, oh God, we're behind. We're 5 years behind on our ability to use, marketing tech or sales tech, or, we're so dragging our heels. And true, not true. Do you have a perspective on it?
No, I would agree with that. And I would say, from a tech perspective, we're a very tech savvy, tech friendly ecosystem. But when it comes to marketing, the number of people that are still focusing on an outbound model, they love their cold calls, they love pounding the pavement, but they're not driving their digital marketing. And to be fair, I understand. A lot of them have been burned by it. There's a lot
That's
of
true. That's a true statement.
bad actors out there in the marketing world
Yeah.
that, they hang a shingle and they say, we're a digital marketer, or we're going to do your SEO, or we're going to do your Google ads. And they just collect a paycheck and that money is gone.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth of the client, or of the small business owner or the medium business owner. And they're like, why would we ever blow all that money again? And they don't realize that there are effective digital marketing agencies out there that can do astounding things, that can really drive business to you when the SEO, when the digital marketing, when the Google AdWords are all sort of working harmoniously. It can be like turning on a faucet, it really drives that inbound marketing.
And that, in a complement with your cold calls and you're pounding the pavement, and like, you need to surround that customer with as many opportunities as possible to understand who you are, even know you exist, get connected to the problem that they may not even know that you have a solution for, especially if you're dealing with tech and any type of innovation. Like, they might be problem aware, but they're not solution aware. So how are you kind of getting that in front of them? And we recently brought digital media in-house. We've had a really strong partner. You probably know Jake Suri from Fountain Partnership. Mm-hmm. We acquired their North American division back in the spring because we just saw so many opportunities. One, if you're going to prove out your strategy, your brand, your positioning, your ICP, all those things, there's no better way to do it than with a properly run digital marketing campaign, because it can prove you right and it can prove you wrong, but both can happen quickly and you can adjust and move forward. And the amount of accounts that we get to take a look at, and again, I'm not going to speak out of school here, but when we open the hood, it's like, you are getting hosed. No one's even looked at this account in months. This is a shit show. And, Jake is very credible, very skilled individual, just as the leader in that team. And he's like, Tyler, like, you wouldn't guess what I saw today. And to your point, it's happening, especially in the SEO and in the digital and the PPC space. It's so easy to sell snake oil. It really,
and that's a great point that you raised too. And, for anyone that has an agency, and, maybe they feel like, their business is going well, and maybe they feel like that's a result of, their marketing efforts, it never hurts to get a second opinion.
Take a look. Yeah, go to another doctor and see before you get cut open.
And even if you have a great relationship with your agency, they will respect you for auditing their process. And if they don't, that should be a huge red flag.
100%. Yeah.
Right.
So what are you hiding under there? Mm-hmm. No, and it's very real. And he writes, for so many business owners, I think, kind of like everyone's a marketer because we see advertising kind of mindset. And then there's the companies that see the value in it and companies that don't. It's an interesting space to be in, but with the world of digital and metrics and tracking and systems, and you can really prove out, someone's opinion, the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion says, this will work. Well, let's test it. I'm not going to argue with you. Let's test it. And you can find it very quickly if you have any type of rigor or discipline with your digital media. On top of the fact that you still need to be out there, you still need to be networking. Like it's quite a burden for business owners, the amount of stuff we all need to do to stay top of mind at that right moment, right?
That's an excellent point that you make, that neither one of them operates in a vacuum. Like, no. If you're going to be doing the cold calling, if you're going to be doing the networking, if you're going to be doing sort of traditional marketing activities, have the other collateral there to support you. Yeah. Because if you cold call somebody and you say, hey, this is Russ from Red Fox, the first thing they're going to do is go to your LinkedIn, go to your website, go to your socials.
Usually while they're talking to you. If you did get through, they're absolutely 100%. Checking you while they're talking to you. 100%.
And if the links to your socials are broken, if they're not active, if your website doesn't work, if it's terrible to look at, like, all of those things are going to completely change the tenor of their receptiveness, like whether or not they're receptive to what you're talking about.
And what you just analyzed, it's so subconscious, because the death of any brand experience is inconsistency. Like, oh, I kind of felt this over here and I felt something different over here. The customer isn't articulating that out loud, but they'll articulate it by just clicking away. If I drive to the store and I go in, even if it's not great, I'll probably slug it out, but I'm one mouse click away from going somewhere else. Yep. And I joke all the time, and this is, when's Amazon your competitor? Always, because odds are that customer had an Amazon level experience, and now they've gone to your small business website, and they will not tolerate anything less than a good UX UI, a good customer experience, which ultimately in my books, that is your brand. If you say you're easy to work with, but you take 17 clicks to get to a contact form, you're not easy to work with. That's not true. You made that untrue. And we overcomplicate it, but it still comes down to like, did you make it easy for me? And did you live up to what you said or implied in your promise, in your lingo, in my interaction with you?
Reducing friction or eliminating friction in the buying and selling process, I can't emphasize that enough. Like convincing people to buy from you should be the hardest thing you ever have to do with your customer. And once they've made that decision, it should be like falling down stairs easy for them to pay you, right? They shouldn't be having to fill out a ton of forms. They shouldn't have to, it shouldn't be a ton of steps to go through to get to have their money in your pocket. And I see that with so many businesses. They spend so much time convincing someone to buy from them. The person says yes, and then they punish them for it with a punishing process to become a customer.
Well, which is where you get into rev ops, sales ops, a growth strategy, when you're like, we got to look at everything, like both sides of the infinity symbol of the chase the customer, get the customer, but then the retention on the other side of, you're right, so much. I love what you just said. We punish them with an overtly and unnecessarily arduous process.
It should, they should be celebrating. I just said yes to this. They're signing the contract should be as easy as a click and a signature. Paying should be another click. Everything, setting up their account. I've gone into places where you've had to download a PDF, manually fill it out, and it's like, there is an easier way. I know there is. Why aren't you doing it?
Which comes back to your background because everything you just said underpins by this can all be enabled by technology. It's not that you can't, it's just that you haven't. Oh, that's too hard to automate that. That is just not true anymore. There is literally no barriers to what you can do with technology. If you understand, if you have a guide, a Russ, to help guide you through, who's the sage monk from the hill who comes down and goes, don't worry, let me show. I don't know. That was a weird accent. I don't know what that was about. My wife just tells me not to do accents.
I mean,
anyway, sorry, I really digressed on that one. But that outside opinion to go, in the old days, you had to build it yourself and you had to get a developer. Now it's off the shelf and you can plug it in, which I was kind of ragging on earlier, but done strategically for the right intent of what's the workflow we're trying to create. Then finding the technology, not the other way around. That's where I know we've made that error. We plugged the technology and then figured out workflow. I don't think that's often the most effective way to do it.
Well, I think it's a constant battle between, especially as a founder, between hubris and humility. They
both start with H.
I do love my alliteration. The reality is you're a founder. You've built something great and you should be proud of that. But you should also have the humility to recognize that you don't have all the answers. And, there might be technology that exists. I'm going to guarantee that there's technology that exists that you're not aware of. There's processes, there's peoples, there's skill sets. All of those things exist that are outside of the scope of your expertise. So don't be afraid to talk to somebody. There's so many free resources. And, again, back to the HubSpot fanboy, if you've ever taken a little bit of a dip into the HubSpot Academy, you want to learn about sales tools, you want to learn about sales techniques. It's not just about how to use their software. They have so many great webinars, certification courses on how to market, how to digital market, how to utilize these tools, how to have a great sales process, how to talk to people, how to have sales meetings, so many topics around revenue growth and sales. Have a look and take advantage. It's all free, just waiting to be utilized.
In terms of your ICP, you've used a couple of words that I want to clarify. Small to medium enterprise. Use the word enterprise, which implies a certain size and scope. So, who is your ideal? Because everybody can benefit from what we're talking about. But when you think about the founder who's bootstrapping and got a couple people, and then now they're at 6 or 8, or versus even there's a lot of large organizations with really good sales numbers that are still just dialing for dollars and taking people out for dinners and going to golf tournaments. And their website was created by the CEO's son 3 years ago. And they're doing 50 million. In Alberta, I run into those all the time. So when you look at, who's your ICP, knowing everyone can benefit, where do you like to play, and what are you seeing? And again, part of the Western Canadian being quote unquote behind, you run into a lot of large organizations with really healthy sales numbers that just haven't had to or bothered or believed in going down this road.
So for me, my ideal client is, somebody who's in that, sort of scaling phase. They're typically, I would say, between 10 and I would say about 200 employees.
Okay.
They either
that's a broad range in terms of like operational sophistication.
And I'll give you a reason for that, because in that range, you have the people that don't have a sales department. They have their founder-led sales, but then you have the ones that have moved away from founder-led sales and they've hired a few salespeople, but the founder is still the one managing them.
It's kind of a shit show. My words. It's kind of a shit show.
It is, right? And so you can have a pretty large company that still doesn't have a sales leader. There's no sales manager. There's no director of business development. There's no VP of sales. There's no chief growth officer. And so those gaps are currently being occupied or filled, oftentimes insufficiently, by the founder. Yep. And so that's the range where I typically see that. When you get beyond that, you start to see, okay, they've got their director of business development, they've got their VP of sales, their chief growth officer. All of that is highly focused and more attenuated. They can still benefit from some guidance, right. But in an organization like that, then it becomes like, okay, well, we need a full-time person, and that's not really what I'm looking for. As I grow Red Fox, then and I bring on other people, and maybe we'll be looking more at those higher level commitments and opportunities like that. But right now, we're still in the fledgling stages,
which I appreciate
Red Fox.
Yeah, absolutely. And, which I love that.
We want to be hyper focused on our hedgehog.
The fractional model is so widely talked about. It's such an interesting journey in so many avenues, from the fractional CFO, which I think is probably one of the OGs from a fractional perspective, and it's really evolved. And I see so many people with your seniority level, i.e. experience, i.e. time in the trenches, going, okay, it's like that. Maybe that full-time gig is tougher to land, but wow, I could help 5 or 6 companies, and that's also, let's be honest, for individuals like maybe you and I, that's very engaging. It's very entertaining. It's very like, I can learn, I can solve, I can take things apart. It's, I can work on 1 Lego castle or 5 of them. I'm going to work on 5 because that's more fun. Because each one also you learn and you bring it back to the other one, right? And that's just 100%. Selfishly, that's a great journey to be on.
That shared knowledge as a human is invaluable.
Yeah. That human, just the constantly getting
because
fired up.
You do get tunnel vision, right? When you're, in one organization, your thinking and your processes become organization centric, and you become, institutionalized, as it were.
So it's nothing. I don't like anything about that. You can't see the label when you're inside the bottle. We joke all the time when we deal with companies like, hey, half of our value, especially at the beginning, 3/4 is our view from the outside. Yeah. Talk to me. Obviously, you're playing in the business to business space, probably.
Correct.
What are you seeing in B2B in terms of like, it's people like, it's the same because it's humans. Oh my God, it's totally different because the buying cycle, the dollar value, the level of technical required. Again, I don't know who I'm imitating. We've spent a lot of time in both spaces. Some of our largest clients are P2C, but yet they tend to be clients that have larger, or like we do sell homes. We sell for Honda, so very technically oriented product where it's an engineering led organization. So half the times it's just translating the features and benefits from an engineering lingo, which is much more like B2B world of how do you translate a subject matter expert to maybe a buyer who's less sophisticated because they're a generalist and they're buying a very complex thing. What are you seeing in terms of trends? Are they leveling out, being similar? Are you seeing anything really emerge that you're like, hey, we need to watch that? Or also on the same question, what are you excited about in the B2B space?
So the biggest shift that I've seen I would say in recent years, and I hesitate to say, post versus pre-COVID, but I have seen it in recent years. The biggest shift is toward relationships, and I'll expand on that a little bit. We're finding that people are less willing to do business with any organization that there isn't a certain level of pre-existing attachment.
Okay.
Now, whether it's a known relationship.
That's powerful. There's a lot to unpack in that one alone.
Right. Whether it's, somebody that you trust and you've worked with in the past, or your values align. You know, the things that are important to you are also important to a potential vendor. And people are looking for that sort of continuity of purpose, of alignment, of values, whatever you want to call it. And those relationships have never been more important. So when you're thinking about doing your marketing or doing your sales process, think about how you're building relationships and how you're building your reputation, because your reputation will determine whether or not those relationships happen.
Russ, I don't want to minimize anything you said, but it just sounds like everything's going full circle. Because I would argue that, digital came in and that's going to be the answer to everything. And it's like, oh, relationships matter, connection matters, understanding what's important to you matters, which I would say is how we maybe have done business in the past. I don't know. It just feels so human what you just said, which I love.
It absolutely is.
And that's not to minimize it at all. I think you're absolutely right.
I think the pendulum has swung back. And I think, we went from a place where we no longer shopped at the mom and pop store. We didn't know the store owner by name, and now we went to a place where we didn't care what the barista's name was, or we didn't care, about that level of intimacy. And it was just a transaction, and we wanted the best value, the quickest service, the most convenience. And now we're moving back to where we want a concierge level experience, where we want the personal touch, we want the attachment. We want to know that someone actually cares about us on the seller side.
It used to be you just had to pay a premium for that. Now you often just have to be nice to someone and you get that return.
Yeah.
I've been recently, I grew up in a small town, couldn't move away fast enough. Got to get to the city. It's been amazing. I love it. But I've recently bought a rural property about an hour outside of town. And we've been doing a whole bunch of work with contractors and bringing in power and all, it was a raw piece of land. Everybody's been so great to work with. And I was even talking to my builder. He's like, oh, small town. If you're good to them, they're good to you. If you're not good, then everyone finds out real quick that you're a dick and they don't treat you that way. They've been so helpful. And Calgary's a super nice city and I have nothing negative about the people here. The small town, which is kind of what you just described of connectivity. And, after the second meeting, they kind of treat you a little bit more like they know you. And then they're like, don't worry, we'll take care of that. Or yeah, sorry, they'll call. I don't know. I've just had a very positive experience because it really fell under it was very human. I had a very human experience, which for them is just how they do business. For me, I was like, kind of always ready to deal with whatever shit's going to come at me. And that's not been the case at all.
The handshake agreement still exists.
Yeah. And they'll look you in the eye and they do it. They say they're going to do something. They say they're going to show up. They might not hear from them. They're like, oh my God, are they going to show up? And you typically have oftentimes intercity contractor experience where they're doing you a favor by showing up. I haven't got that feeling recently, and it's been quite refreshing. I really like what you said about how we've gone. And you're right. What is it? Is it pre-COVID? Is it post-COVID? Is like, hey, we tried something else and it wasn't great. It didn't live up to you. I was listening to a podcast the other day about kind of where SEO was going and a lot of the fear around, oh my God, what's going to happen with AI? And I found it laughable in a certain way because they said, listen, that kind of very high level top of funnel search is going to be fulfilled by AI. It's already happening. You get the broad answer off Google, you're there. But they said mid-funnel, when you're like, no, I want to go deeper, companies really need to make sure they understand the problem they're solving. And they really need to make sure they have content that will be helpful for that customer. And, versus just churning out pages full of keywords. And I was like, almost laughable. I'm like, oh, you mean be a legit company who does legit marketing that adds value to your customer? Like, it was so, and they were like, oh wow, that's really changed from just pumping out a bunch of crap to get Google to rank you versus actually trying to be helpful to your customer. I'm like, as marketers, when did we stop? When did that stop being important? And it was a good podcast. Like I was very educated and been doing it for years in some of the biggest brands, but his insights were kind of like what you just said. Oh, you mean add value and be helpful? Huh? Weird. Versus letting the algorithm game the human. It was so funny. I couldn't help but laugh.
Amazing.
Go back to just actually like what problem are you solving? Like, and they said, you got to really, really, especially it talked about B2B or technical sales. You've got to really, really, like, you can't think you know the customer. You legit have to know what they're going through, or they're not going to click on your content when they are indeed looking for more information as they work their way down the funnel, which is where your whole HubSpot platform and your content strategy comes into play, right? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
What do how do you manage for companies that just the time it takes to then, build the systems, but you've got to put things in the systems. You've got to create that content. You've got to take time to interview the customers. Is that something you see companies like, yeah, we know our customers, or is there more of a curiosity to be, at lack of a better word, more empathetic and taking the time to have those deeper conversations?
I think it takes a certain level of self-awareness. I think you're right that there is a bit of like, oh, we know our customers and we know what they like and we know what they don't like and we know how to treat them. But, and again, we go back to the founder-led sales model. You know, if you've been a founder for a number of years and you've built your entire company, you know every one of your clients and customers
Yeah.
intimately.
Yeah.
But when you go to delegate that role, how do you pass on that knowledge?
Often you don't,
Right?
or
It's
not effectively.
impossible.
Yeah.
You can't, it's not like syncing your iPhones and, with a cable, everybody gets that knowledge. It doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's incredibly challenging. But I think just facing that and realizing that there has to be a systematic way
Yeah.
of processing that information rather than just flying by the seat of your pants. Sometimes it's, not to coin a phrase, but it's a bit of a come to Jesus moment for people when they're like, you know what, you're right. I didn't realize that I was actually standing in the way of this. Like how can you expect a new salesperson to come in and treat your sales process as preciously as you would if he or she doesn't have all of the assets
Yeah.
that you have?
Yeah. Which oftentimes is 10 or 15 years of institutional knowledge. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I love what you said. The greatest attribute of any leader, and I think the make or break on where and how far you will go as a leader, is your level, direct correlation of your self-awareness to your journey. You can take all the courses and all the MBAs and do all the things, but if you're not aware of just you of how you show up in whatever that is, take another course, knock yourself out.
That's it. Yeah.
Yes, I'm jaded.
Read another book.
Just, read another book about how other people should act. Hey, I would be remiss because I really appreciate that you're on the journey, and we talked a little bit about Red Fox. Tell us a little bit about Stacked. What's Stacked Consulting? And they chose you and you chose them. So give us a little bit of kind of how that came together.
I love that you pointed that out, and I'm pretty deliberate about who I work with.
I sense that,
And
Russ. I like that about you.
honestly, because, and I mean, I'm sure you are too. Life's too short to work
I'm
with
working on
people.
saying no more, Russ. It's a problem for me. I like to say yes to everything, but I'm working on it.
Life's too short to work with people you don't enjoy working with, right? And
Yeah, facts.
it's that 80-20 rule. You spend 80% of your time working for 20% of the revenue. It's time to let that particular
Let that
client
go.
go,
Let that go. Yeah,
right?
let that go.
And then you focus, right? And so, I started having, it was about a 2-month process when
Nice. Good.
I've known the team at Stack for many years through EO and various other, I mean, like I said, Calgary is a small, big city.
It is.
And, so I've known the team, but when they were looking for someone as a director of business development, they were specifically looking for someone to do it fractionally. And so we started having conversations, and the initial conversations were really about what they do and how they do it. And one of the things that really appealed to me was that they are people centric. They come from a Big Four consulting background, but actually the 10-year anniversary for Stack
they said there's got to be a better way than this, but anyways,
the
we'll let
10-year
that pass.
anniversary for Stack is coming up in February. So
I was going to ask how long they've been around.
Yeah,
That's
no,
all.
they've been-
10
they've been
years
at
is
it for a
legit.
while.
You passed a bunch of milestones to get to that one.
100%.
Right on. Good for them. That's
and
awesome.
so, they saw the model that everyone else was doing in the business consulting and management world. And they said, there is a better way, and we know how to do it better, and we're going to do it better. And so, they take a very collaborative approach. And when, there's 3 sort of pillars to what they do, and it's, overall business strategy, there's post-merger integration, and then there's organizational design.
Okay.
And so those are sort of 3 tenets of business strategy that they focus on. And they just work so closely with organizations that they develop this intimacy and this relationship that we were talking about. So they come away with, a result and a value that people just don't get from other organizations. Sure, anybody can generate a report. I was mentioning at the outset that we were at that conference yesterday, and we were chatting with one senior people person from an organization. And he was saying in his experience, they were getting a little frustrated with some organizations because you could tell it was a copy paste, a find replace of a template that they were using to generate a report.
Oh, we've all got those. And sometimes you even find the other company's name in the thing.
There was, right? You've seen it. And there was just no uniqueness. There was no customization, no specificity for their organization. And
which is in itself a business model, but just be transparent that that's what it is and don't pretend it's the other. And I think that's the
exactly.
Don't bullshit me. Hey, and we have a proven system and everybody follows the same one. Okay, well, at least now I understand. No, we build a custom approach, but here's the template everybody gets. I get those battle with each other, right?
And you never want, someone to come after you and look at your work product and say, this is terrible. Like, who did this? Right? You always want whatever you produce for a client to stand up to the test of time. And when somebody looks at it later, even if they don't agree with the result, they can say, yes, I see the work that was put in here. I see what was done.
Disagreeing is one thing. Devaluing the work is another. I think those are like, hey, I would have done this differently, but I appreciate that when this was done, there was some good thinking behind it. Like that's a different assessment, right? It's a little more mature assessment as well often.
Yeah.
Versus it's always easier to shit on the other guy's stuff, right? You can be careful with that. It's very dangerous.
One of the things that struck me about the team is just how supremely capable they are. And they're so busy here. Like there's always something going on. And they're definitely in a growth phase. And I have to hand it to Dustin for having that sort of level of awareness and saying, hey, now's the time, and he loves what he does. He loves the operational aspect. He loves consulting and he loves being involved with the clients. And so why would you force yourself to not do that when you can easily delegate the role of business development to someone else? And that's what I love doing.
That's a mic drop. There you go. And enter Russ, enter Red Fox. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Well, you certainly feel like you're where you should be, if I may be so bold to say that from the outside.
Definitely agree with that statement. Like you said, we were chatting before we started here today, and you reach a certain point in your life, and you start to look at your decisions and where you are, and it doesn't matter how old you are. If you're happy with where you are and you're happy with what you're accomplishing and you're happy with what you're doing,
and the people you're doing it with, let's be clear. Like you said earlier, life's too short to work with assholes. You didn't say that. That's my words.
Yeah, I would never say asshole on there.
No, that's for sure. As the host, I sometimes get carried away. It happens, Russ. It happens. Also I just want to give you some feedback with unsolicited and maybe unwanted or otherwise, but love the brand. I love the Red Fox. I think it's so on point. I've known you a little bit off. It's Calgary. I've known you a little bit off and on over the years. We've connected a little bit at some of the conferences. We'll give a plug out to the Mesh conference. And I think I might even run into you over Stampede. Shocker. It's Calgary.
Yeah.
But just love and going out on your own and doing the thing and be like, you know what? There's no other way to do this because it's time. And you put in the cycles and you put in the time. And when you made that call, and I'm sure Jade Alberts, was talking to Jade yesterday about how we've so glamorized the founder and the entrepreneur versus the value of kind of learning and putting in a little bit of spending the time. And I get it. Nobody wants to wait. None of us have patience. I'm right up there. But the ability to get to a certain point, you're like, yeah, you know what? It's time to do the thing. And so congratulations to you for doing the thing.
Thank you. Nothing gives you a greater appreciation for how to grow a business than growing one of your own.
Absolutely.
And if you can't grow your own, maybe you shouldn't be hanging up a shingle as a growth strategist.
Yes. I think Jade made a comment. If anyone knows Jade has opinions on things, which I love. One of the things I love about him.
Great opinions.
Yeah, he does. Absolutely. And he, how many people that have never done the thing are out there giving advice on how to do the thing? And he's
Story about Jade. Legit, the only person I've ever golfed with that golfed in flip-flops. So...
He showed up on a podcast yesterday, Jade and Sapir from Corridor, literally wearing a shirt with his own face on the shirt. It was so good. So Jade.
Love it. Probably
wearing flip-flops as well.
Represent.
Yeah, absolutely. This is who I am. If you like it, cool. If you don't, I'm cool with that as well. Russ, what's the best way if someone there's a million ways. Are you a LinkedIn guy? Do you like smoke signals? Do you like carrier pigeons? Do you like Instagram? What's your poison?
I love LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time there. It's a great tool. And, it's as authentic a view of me as you're going to see. my Instagram is going to be a lot of food pictures and,
Yeah,
stuff like
I
that.
follow
But
you on IG. Yeah,
yeah,
that's fun.
check out my LinkedIn, find me there. Hit my website, rdfx.ca. Check it out.
Very cool.
You know,
All the
and
things back to your
I
point
will
about
give
being
a
consistent. Yeah.
proviso that, don't judge me on my website. I am not a web designer, and I did bootstrap Red Fox, but there is some room for improvement there. But it
Well,
gets the point
the
across.
website should always be a living, breathing thing. It should never be a set it and forget it. But anyways, let's not get. I think I've been preaching enough today. I need to dial it back. Russ, one, really good to have you on the show. Great to connect, and take
Amazing to be
interactions
here.
and bump ins at different events and turn it into a really valuable conversation with some insights. Also, I always love to hear people's stories and what you're doing and how you're doing it. And wishing you much success, which I know is going to come. And you and I will cross paths again.
Yes, we will. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much, Tyler. Have a great day.
You too.